Fat Moose Comics, established in 1982, is New Jersey's best and oldest comic book store. Moose has that rare, old-school comic shop feel and camaraderie, yet also remains a welcoming space for new fans. Visit them in person in Whippany, New Jersey, or reach out via the Fat Moose Comics Facebook page. If you have children and want a family-friendly store, look no further than Aw Yeah Comics. Visit one of their 3 locations, Harrison, New York, Muncie, Indiana, or Skokie, Illinois, and check out awyeahcomics.com for more. Their name says exactly how they feel about it. Aw yeah. In the 1950s, George Reeves embodied the Man of Steel in Superman's first television adaptation, from its gritty black and white beginnings to the kid-friendly color years. To this day, an entire generation reveres George as their Superman, while for others, the show remains an overlooked, underrated chapter in the character's history. On this podcast, we bring everyone together as we break down each episode of Adventures of Superman, examining it within the context of the series itself, as well as the larger Superman mythology. Welcome to another exciting episode in the Adventures of Superman. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me to discuss Season 3, Episode 8, Clark Kent Outlaw, is returning guest, Rich Roney. Welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me. And quickly, I'm 69. I've never seen this episode. Even when I was a child, I never saw this episode. So I have a lot to share with you.
I'm really excited to get your thoughts. This is one of those episodes that when you told me you hadn't ever seen it, I said, man, I can't wait to talk about it. And my only concern was that I was building it up too much for you and overselling it. But I'm glad that it seems like you had a positive reaction to it. I figured that you would. And just to set this up quickly for our audience before we get into it more specifically, when Clark is framed to look like he's part of an elusive criminal organization, he and Perry fake his firing so he can go undercover and bring down the gang from the inside. This aired on September 10th, 1955. You know, the last episode, Olsen's Millions, aired on June 4th. So the show was off then for the summer. And I came back in September. This was written by Leroy H. Zerin and directed by George Blair. Our guest cast, Tristram, if I'm saying that right, Coffin as Jason Stoddard, Sid Tomac as Curtis, John Doucette as Foster, George Eldridge as Thomas Wingate, Patrick O'Moore as Bennett, and Lynn Thomas as Anne. So, overall thoughts on this one?
I loved it. And there's so many little intervals of things I want to share with you. But I never saw this as a child. So as a consequence of our having this discussion, I watched it 3 times. I loved it. Now, you set it up, right? And we've seen John Doucette in other episodes, and we've seen Tristan in, I think, was it The Broken Statues? Was he in that?
I forget offhand.
I think he might have been the big bad guy in Broken Statues. But there were things about this. We're going to get to it. But there was one thing that caused me to fall out of my chair, a surprise that I didn't see coming. We'll get to that when we get to it.
So my last 2 things before we really dive in. One, in my mind, I've been kind of thinking about these color episodes in a few different categories. And one of those categories is episodes that actually kind of live up to the promise of the first couple of seasons, the black and white era of the show. And Clark Kent Outlaw for me is one that I would put in that category. I'm curious if you would, as you're nodding along.
Yes,
so I take it you would. Yeah.
Yes, I would. I would. I do want to do the factual information, but I want to come back to this. So the villain, Tristan, who I think was Mr. Jason, who is really the organizer and the intellect and the leader, he reminded me a lot of Fairchild from The Face and the Voice. I mean,
yes,
this was a villain that he was clearly, he conveyed menace. You know, he was menacing, he was serious, he was intense, he was intellectually astute because he pulled off this con. So I could have seen, just the same way I wished Fairchild would have been a Lex Luthor, I could see this guy as a recurring villain. I was impressed with that.
Yes, I agree. The other big picture thing for me is over on my other show, Digging for Kryptonite, we recently spent multiple episodes going through the Jeff Loeb, Joe Kelly era of the comic books from the early 2000s. And Jeff Loeb in particular wrote the Superman title. And at the very end of his run, it was extremely similar to this, where Perry and Clark fake Clark's firing and then reveal this plan where Clark is going to continue to work undercover for the planet to try to take down President Luthor. So this is during the period of time before Superman, Batman, Public Enemies, but it just kind of called this to mind. And if I'm not mistaken, I there are other kind of references to the George Reeves series, so I feel like that was at least somewhat of an influence on that Loeb title in particular. So I don't know if this episode specifically sparked anything, but it was just kind of an interesting connection point. And for me personally, having just gone back through those stories where Clark was fake fired and then was working undercover, it was just interesting to see that play out in this old episode as well.
I agree.
Yeah. All right, so we'll get into it here. Clark and Perry show up at a shootout between police, led by Henderson, and two members of an elusive gang. Superman intervenes, but while Clark is absent, one of the criminals plants stolen money in Clark's car and claims Clark has been working with him. This was quite a bombastic opening here.
/ super dangerous. I mean,
they just pull right on up to that shootout.
Yeah. I mean, for the benefit of your listeners, there was a shootout, right? And Henderson and I think a couple of police officers were crouched down behind a car with their revolvers, and they were exchanging gunfire with the two villains in this cabin or something. And Clark had the coolest sports car. Clark clearly had a better salary than Lois, who was pining for a $10 hat many times. This was a 1952 silver Hayes Healy or something. It was an elegant sports car.
Well, look, I mean, Clark's a man, so this unfortunately would likely still hold true now, but especially then, yeah, I'm sure he was pulling down significantly more than she was. Yeah,
but they drove right up behind all these bullets. I mean, it was a shootout. And Perry's not exactly nimble and agile, so he's getting out of the car. He's standing up. Everyone else is crouched down. Henderson's got a tear gas gun. Clark wasn't worried about bullets hitting that car.
No, I know that was so over the top. Look, we get it. They needed the car in position so that the money could be planted. Like I get it, but it just felt so wildly unrealistic and unsafe that they would be able to drive right up to it. I mean, on the other hand, we have seen throughout this show a particularly close working relationship between the Daily Planet and the police department. So part of me is like, yeah, I don't know. Henderson probably wouldn't mind having a couple extra pair of hands. I mean, I don't know, but
yeah, we'll get some good PR for the police department.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess we can just kind of go along with that. I thought that this trick that the bad guy plays of just addressing Clark as if he's one of them, I thought that was pretty clever. I liked the way that played.
Yes, it seemed credible, especially when John Doucette, come on, Kent, they got us, right? And then he points out that, hey, the money's sitting in the glove compartment. Clark rolled with the punches. It was, from a con standpoint and from, hey, I'm going to pull this guy down with us. I mean, clearly they couldn't have known that would be an intrinsic step to having Clark come into the gang. You know, no one knew at that time. But it was kind of, a pretty vindictive move. Hey, you hurt us with these news articles. Oh, we'll get even. We'll smack you back.
Yeah, and it's funny too, because towards the end of that scene, initially I was a little bit put off by Perry, but more so Henderson of seemingly going along with this. But I said to myself, well, he's very by the book.
And what do you do when you see all the money right in front of you?
Right. And when we get to the next two scenes, which we'll talk about in a second, but where you have Perry and Clark and then Henderson and Clark, you see that both of them recognize that this is clearly a frame up and they're going to go along with Clark's plan. So
and clearly,
that smoothed over a lot for me.
And clearly the police officer that had John Doucette wasn't too observant.
No. Yeah, I know.
Of course, that would have ruined the premise of the whole episode, right?
Yeah.
Hey, wait a minute. I saw him put that money in there.
Yeah. But yeah, no, just that whole business about, come on, Ken, like just addressing Clark as if he's been part of the gang. Yeah, I like that.
And what if the glove compartment were locked?
Yeah, I know. I guess I would have fallen apart. We would have stuck it under the seat or something. I don't know. Yeah. So that's our setup here. As we continue, Perry posts Clark's bail and suspects correctly that Clark has a plan, which he does. Perry will loudly fire Clark over the intercom so that Lois and Jimmy can hear. And then Clark will go undercover to find the gang's mysterious leader and bring them down from the inside. I mean, this, if ever there were a moment that Perry White and John Hamilton were made for, it was this.
Oh, this, after they pull this fake story and they get loud on the speaker, into Lois's office. Lois is crying, right? But Perry looked so gleeful when he has this big beaming smile and he's shaking hands with Clark. He looked so happy and so pleased with himself. I think that's the only time I've ever seen him smile expansively.
It's like, hey, buddy, we're not out of the woods yet here. This is only the start of the plan. It seemed pretty clear he was reading his lines as he was yelling at Clark, right? Looking down at that paper.
Yes.
Yeah. But you know what? Maybe I'll be super generous. Maybe Perry in story wrote a little script for himself as to what he was going to say.
Okay.
I'm being very generous.
You're being very generous.
At police headquarters, Clark makes a big show in front of Henderson and the two criminals, also getting out on bail, about how he won't be able to get another job at a newspaper and will have to find some other way to make money. How'd you like that?
I did like that. Two things, a bit of trivia, I'll say. The police station that Bill Henderson, Inspector Henderson, works in is the same police station from the Rockford Files.
Oh.
And I the last time when we had the episode with Henderson's son, I remember from other shows seeing that building and I couldn't. And then I happened to be channel surfing a couple of weekends ago and they had a rerun of the Rockford Files and they used the same police station as where Rockford's police lieutenant partner worked.
Oh,
so
good catch.
that was a bit of trivia that was intriguing to me. The other thing that struck me is Clark dealt with this a little differently than the last time he was foist out when he was asking for, hey, can you loan me a nickel for a donut or a cup of coffee? I'm good for it.
Yeah, this isn't sad sack, down on his luck, fired Clark. This
Especially
is
when
like,
the temp lady's going, move on, get out of here.
Yeah, no, this is like guns blazing. I'm going to make a living come hell or high water, Clark. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, very different from when he's like asking for charity at the coffee wagon.
Yeah. Well, they have to put a different spin on it. And yeah, I mean, it works here because the criminals take the bait and recruit Clark at his apartment, promising more money than 100 reporters make in a year, but requiring Clark to prove himself, which he does by using his super hearing to crack a safe. This was probably my favorite moment of the entire episode when he cracks the safe using his super hearing, right? And
which he clearly didn't do in an episode we discussed a while ago.
That one just rip it off. Yeah. I mean, we understand why he didn't rip it off here. He was performing as Clark, but in that other episode with the cat, with Jimmy and the old lady, it's like, yeah, could Superman not? I guess in that other episode, it was such an urgent situation because the cat was running out of air. They didn't have even a few seconds to spare.
His hearing wasn't that good.
Yeah. But I love how sly Clark plays it here because they have some line about how, well, yeah, that, and then about how he's had another life before being a reporter, right? Something to that effect. I don't remember the exact verbiage, but that was the spirit of it.
Yeah, I've been around.
Yeah. I like that sly demeanor he displays.
Now, what I found interesting, and you and I need your insight on this because I'm watching the episodes that you and I have agreed upon, but you're doing a much more comprehensive review.
We're doing all of them.
But this is the third apartment I've seen for Clark.
Yeah.
We saw, with the stolen costume, he had one apartment. With Panic in the Sky, he had a different apartment. And this is the third. He's in a third different apartment. And the doors are on different sides and stuff like that. So Clark moves around.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. That is fair to say. Well, don't they reuse the set from Jimmy's new apartment from Olsen's Millions in this one?
Yes.
Is it for Clark's apartment here, or is it for the bad guys? I forget. It's Clark's, right?
It's Clark's. Remember they knock on the door and he goes, come on in, it's open.
Yeah.
And then they kind of go, come on, let's see what you can do. You want to join the gang. So they approach him in his apartment, and he's sitting in the chair. He goes, come on in, it's open. And there's a little back and forth. John Doucette kind of recruits him.
Well, look, Clark's not tied down. He moves around a lot in Metropolis.
Yeah,
he needs a year or so at one place, then he wants to just switch it up.
He needs a little coin for the Top Hat Club.
Exactly. Oh, Tip Top.
Is that it?
The Tip Top Club.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, wow, that's what I'm saying. I feel like that was a missed opportunity here in this episode. If they're trying to kind of play up like his bad boy ways. I know. He should have been like, all right, now guys, I got to get out of here. They're waiting for me down at the Tip Top Club. Oh, it would have been great.
Wouldn't it?
I love this episode. I don't think it will be a shock when we get to our rating system in terms of how many Great Caesar's Ghosts I give this one. However, my only complaint is that I wish they had kind of pushed it further in terms of bad boy Clark. I mean, could they not have put him in a different suit or any kind of different attire? You know what I mean? Like as he's going undercover with it, I just feel like we could have. I'm not saying he's got to be like Fonzie in a leather jacket, or something, but could we not have modified his look a little bit to kind of signify?
That's intriguing because even when we saw the face and the voice, Boulder had different clothes on.
Yeah.
Couldn't you get, a dark suit and a different tie?
Yeah.
That's a good point.
I mean, I suppose the reason why the gang is able to make it even plausible that Clark is part of their network. And I guess the reason why they recruit him, it's sort of this idea that as a prominent reporter, he has access, he has information, he has a position of influence that can be exploited. So arguably
he brings value.
You would want him to present as the traditional classic Clark Kent reporter. I'm reading a lot into this, so maybe we can account for it that way. I mean, in terms of what was actually going on, it was probably, we don't want to have to get another wardrobe for him, but or if he just took off his tie, you know what I mean? Like something.
And listen, we've seen him in his old apartment with Candy Myers when he had the silk dressing gown and no tie. Right? And the wrestling one.
It's like on Smallville. Every time he's exposed to red kryptonite, puts on the leather jacket. It's like, all right, like this is Red K. Clark. I don't know. I just kind of wanted some kind of visual cue, attire-wise. I think that could have been interesting. Single Bound is a new podcast series hosted by married couple Amy and Logan as they review single issues of comics. And if the title makes you think of Superman, you're not alone, as the Man of Steel is a regular topic of discussion. Listen and subscribe on Spotify and YouTube, and follow the show on Instagram at Single Bound Podcast. My love of the TV series Smallville is well documented, and there's one rewatch podcast that's always at the top of my queue, Zach Moore's Always Hold On to Smallville, which continues with more great Smallville and Superman talk now that their series rewatch has concluded. Listen wherever you get podcasts. Whether you're an independent filmmaker or you just love movies, don't miss these New Jersey film festivals. Brightside Tavern in Jersey City, Hang On to Your Shorts in Asbury Park, and Round Reel in Bloomfield. Submission information for filmmakers can be found at filmfreeway.com. All right, now it really gets interesting here. Now that he's in, Clark, those always rustling those papers, man.
Sorry.
It's okay. Now that he's in, Clark finally sees how the operation works. The gang calls a wholesale jeweler claiming to be the police and that the store was robbed. When the jeweler comes down outside, they knock him out and he wakes up in a supposed hospital where an FBI agent, actually Jason, leader of the gang, elicits key information. In this case, he learns that hundreds of carats worth of uncut diamonds are in a safe in the jeweler's apartment. I thought this was is this the moment that really made you?
No, it's coming.
Still
Not
coming.
yet. No.
But I thought this was a very clever setup where they knock people out. They bring them to a fake hospital. They pose as an FBI agent. Of course, their guard's going to be down. They're going to be willing to cooperate and share. They think that they're sharing this information with law enforcement.
And the bad guy, who is Jason, had a con name of Stoddard, right? And he was very credible at the beginning. He gets the fake phone call. He goes, I'm from the FBI. He was super credible. So I think I alluded to this. I could see this the same way I thought Fairchild could have been a Lex Luthor for the TV show. I think this actor could have portrayed a criminal villain or gang leader who would have been very credible
as like an ongoing adversary.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. I don't mean to always bring this up, but yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things that kind of remains in my mind. I think a big missed opportunity of the series that you had so many actors coming back in different roles where, I don't know, it would have been interesting to just kind of have them come back in their original roles. And then you just kind of have a little bit more of a through line or just more of a sense that it's like, yeah, there are some kind of consistent adversaries and that just kind of elevates them a little bit. And I think it raises the stakes, right? It's like, oh, they're back.
And to your point, other TV shows of the same era, like The Life and Legend of Wyatt Earp, or some of the Wells Fargo stories, the Westerns of the same era, did have recurring characters. So I have maybe because this was in syndication and they didn't have the consistency of a weekly schedule on a network, or did they have some sort of like, look, whatever we do, we got to reset the clock at the end of the episode. There is no through line to other characters because it's really, Perry, Lois, Jimmy, and Inspector Henderson, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it is what it is. Before Clark can leave to steal the diamonds as instructed, Lois and Jimmy intervene to try to appeal to Clark and are taken hostage. We have to have an episode, so I get this. And you know what, though? All right, I'm actually going to stop myself because I was going to say, all right, it's a bit of a stretch that Perry and Clark didn't clue in the only other two people who work at the Daily Planet. I know there are other employees. We just don't see them. So but part of me was going to say like, oh, they should have just let them in. But going back to that comic book storyline I was talking about, Perry White was insistent that the only people who could know that Clark was working to take down President Luthor were Perry, Clark, and Superman. And Clark even kept the secret from Lois, who he was married to in the comics. Now, when we went back through that comic book storyline, that was the bridge too far for me where I'm like, come on, like I don't buy that he would keep this from her. But just as another example, I mean, that's an even more extreme example of the level of secrecy. So yeah, I mean, I guess I could buy that they would keep Lois and Jimmy in the dark here. And since we have so few characters, it's like you need them to be in the dark to like sell this.
Right.
And I did appreciate their concern for Clark.
Yes.
They think they're saving him from turning to a life of crime.
Their compassion, their concern. It is intrinsic to the storyline. I can certainly understand why Perry didn't tell Jimmy, but Lois, I'm on the bubble on,
I know, but I feel like in this show, Lois and Jimmy are such a duo that I don't know that you could tell one and not the other.
That's an interesting point. Because
otherwise I would agree with you. So in any event, yes, they show up and they're taken. And it's a fine line for Clark because he can't display too much concern or empathy for them, but there is still some, right? It's like, wow, I forget exactly what he says, but he essentially wants to make sure that their safety will be guaranteed before he goes off.
Yes.
But it's not all warm and fuzzy either.
But he's a delicate line. Kind of harsh. He's kind of harsh. Like, look, I really don't care for them. I don't want to see them again. They remind me of the disgrace I went through at the Daily Planet. I think he uses the word, they remind me of my disgrace.
Yeah.
So he was, and this is my great impression or appreciation for George Reeves' acting ability. He quickly jumped to a more serious, harsh tone. I was impressed with that.
Yeah, I don't want to keep bringing up gripes. I just, once again, it kind of all ties back to the same thing. I just think they could have done more. I think they could have given him even more to do. Because like when we go back to one of our all-time favorite episodes, The Face and the Voice, and you're seeing him play all of these different versions, like it was so good that, yeah, I feel like we just could have pushed this a little bit more because he definitely could have handled it.
That's a great point. Because when we did The Face and the Voice, there were at least 4 iterations. Like he had, he was Superman. He was confident Clark. He was bewildered, scared, anxious, like, am I sleepwalking? And then he played Boulder. So he had such range.
And then Boulder as Superman.
Oh,
yeah.
So 5.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, so I feel like clearly he can do it. I think they could have given him more here.
Yes.
Yeah. They just could have, this one just could have been pushed a little bit harder, but.
Good point.
But I like what they have.
Good point.
Rather than steal the diamonds, Clark changes to Superman and flies to a diamond mine and borrows the jewels that he digs for by hand in the cave.
Now this, okay, so again, I saw this for the first time, and I'm looking at it from being a guy who's 69 years old. I first thought, well, why the hell didn't you fly to Wingate's apartment? His wife's out of town. You got super hearing, open the safe, right? Why did you have to go to South Africa and do the Empire Mining Company, right? But then I realized, it lets him put on the Superman costume, break through the rocks in the mine. It gives the children Superman in costume using some super strength. But I figured, well, you just set it up that he's one of the best safecrackers in the world. Like Jimmy Valentine, they use that code name.
Right. And clearly he's not planning to let them get away with the diamonds.
Right.
So even if he had taken it from Wingate, it would have been with the intention of ultimately putting
returning
them back.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. So yes, we have that business with the mine. When Clark returns with the loot, Jason instructs him to off Lois and Jimmy. Playing along, Clark and his accomplice tie Lois and Jimmy to chairs in Perry's office and set fire to another chair, leaving them to burn.
This is one of two surprises. This surprised me. And I commend Clark for his logic. Like, hey, we'll do this. They'll die in the fire, and we'll have our alibis. We'll be safe. They can't prove we were here. Now, this is one of two surprises. What annoyed me was as they're opening the double doors to Perry's office, Clark goes, wait a minute, there's an alarm. I got to turn it off. That was the adjacent door, right? So there was no alarm pad, right?
Fair.
But it did surprise me when Clark pulls out the knife and starts cutting up the chair. I'm going, my God, what is going on here?
Yeah. Yeah, I know. He really does a number on that chair. We'll find out at the end of the episode that it was fireproof, and that's how Jimmy and Lois are able to be spared. But yeah, I mean, that was, and even, I didn't remember specifically what each turn in this episode was. So even as I was rewatching this, I said like, oh yeah, what is the exact way out of this? So yeah, I mean, this one, I think that is definitely a moment where you really do wonder, like, what's the plan here?
and listen, me seeing this for the first time, and everything going through my mind was, what's going on? I mean, especially when he lights it on fire, right? He cuts it up, he pulls stuff out, he puts newspaper over there, he starts the fire going, and then he leaves. And I'm going, well, I know they're all going to be okay because there's another 30 episodes yet to come. I know Jimmy and Lois make it.
Yeah, they probably won't be burned to death in episode 8. But yeah, no, I mean, I agree. So I think this is an instance where they do push it to the point that they should. And this, I think, really holds your attention and builds the suspense. No, I'm with you. I think that was definitely a standout moment. Now we have another huge turn here. Upon his return to the hideout, Clark's cover is blown. It turns out Perry is the latest victim of this hospital FBI ruse.
This had me fall out of my chair. I was kind of tuning out, and I figured Wingate was going to be in there. And then when they pulled that bookcase back and go through the secret mirror, and I see Perry, I didn't see that coming at all. And they did it subtly. When I watched the episode the second and third time, you could see where Jason had concerns. And he goes, I want to check something out. And I didn't pick up the significance of that in the first watching. So when they pulled the bookcase back and you see Perry in there revealing everything, yes, I paid the bail. This was a step to infiltrate the gang. It really amazed me. I was very surprised.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I thought that was, and it shows Jason's savvy, right? And it makes sense that they wouldn't be that quick to trust Clark completely. So yeah, that was a good end. To the show's credit, I mean, they really didn't tip their hand. It's not like you saw Perry getting knocked out or anything like that. So it really was a surprise when they pull that curtain and it's Perry. Yeah.
Very much a surprise. And I still am. Wow, that was a quick moment. There was no forewarning.
Yeah. So Clark and Perry are made to take sleeping pills. Clark fakes falling asleep, changes into Superman, and arrives to karate chop the fleeing criminals. Later, Clark, quote unquote, wakes up to reunite with the Daily Planet crew and Henderson, And Clark reveals Lois and Jimmy were never in any real danger, as the chair Clark had set fire to was fireproof. Right? Clark had been concerned that Perry would fall asleep with a lit cigar, and burn the place down, so gave him this fireproof chair.
Hopefully he always sat in that chair and not any other chair or on the sofa.
Yeah, I know, at his desk, which would be the most common. That's fine. And then there's also dialogue about the other victims of this ruse were being held and they were going to be released and all of that. So yeah, this was a strong one, man.
I agree.
So the last thing we have to do, of course, is to give our rating. But is there anything else about this episode we didn't talk about that you wanted to?
Well, the only thing that I will say, and it's consistent with our assessment of these things, those were the fastest acting sleeping pills I've ever seen.
Yes.
Just like,
I know, it's not like they chloroform them.
No.
That would have been one thing if they just put them over their, put the cloth over their face and then they go, all right, I get that. We've seen that a million times.
Perry no sooner had a sip of water and then he was out. They were the fastest acting sleeping pills you could imagine.
Yeah, I know. I know, or if they, I know it's tough because my next thing was going to be, well, they could have injected them. Well, you can't inject Clark.
Yeah.
Right. So but chloroform would have worked, and at least that would have accounted for it. But maybe that would have been too violent for the kids. Right.
Oh, yeah.
A cloth doused in chemicals shoved over their face. Yeah. So maybe this was the softer way to do it. Yeah. All right. So on a scale of 1 to 5, Great Caesar's ghosts, how many do we give Clark Kent Ella? 4. This doesn't get a 5 from you. Wow.
4.
Okay. Oh, you know what? All right. I think there are episodes we're going to get to much deeper into the series that might elicit a 5 from you. Okay. And I also, your rating is your rating. I thought this might earn a 5. This is a 5 for me. I'm going 5 Great Caesar's Ghost for this one. Yeah. From the first time I watched the color episodes and upon rewatch, I think this kind of also speaks to these are not generally my favorite episodes of the series. And so when I have one like this, that's a real gem, no pun intended, given the diamonds of the episode. When there's something like that, it really stands out to me. And I feel like this, so far in our discussions, this is as close as I feel like we've gotten to the kind of compelling episodes of the black and white era. So yeah, I'm going to go 5 for this one.
And I'll tell you, part of my reason for the 4 was things you alluded to. They had opportunities to amplify or set the stage more where Clark is a bad guy or he adapts more of a persona. It seemed to move too quick, and I thought there were lost opportunities.
Yeah, no, clearly, I don't disagree. If I'm really being honest, I'd probably knock it at least half a ghost, but I won't split hairs. I'm going to stick with my 5. I'll be generous today. All right, thank you so much. You're going to be back in a couple of episodes for the Bully of Dry Gulch, so I'm excited for that. And of course, we'll continue with our regular coverage next week. So thank you, Rich. Thank you, audience. I always appreciate you tuning in. Until next time, remember, only Superman can do super things. This podcast is an affiliate of BCW Supplies. The next time you need to restock on comic book bags, boards, boxes, and more, be sure to use promo code FSP to save 10% on your order. That's FSP for Flat Squirrel Productions. It helps support the show too. Thank you. Support the show and receive exclusive content, including the spin-off podcast Beyond Metropolis, by becoming a member at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato. My sincere thanks to all patrons. Please subscribe, rate, and review today via your platform of choice, and continue the conversation by joining us on social media. Links are in the show notes. Flat Squirrel Podcast is also home to Digging for Kryptonite, a Superman fan journey, a long-running weekly series mining Superman's vast mythology across time and media. Subscribe today.